Sophia Reyes had cleaned thousands of rooms, but this Wednesday morning was different. Walking through the grand hallways of a Silvergate Hills mansion for a scheduled deep clean, she froze in the sunlit private study. On a mahogany shelf, nestled between old books and fine ornaments, stood a framed photograph of a young man wearing a warm smile she had known her entire life. The man in the photo was unmistakably her father, decades younger, but absolutely him. Sophia's voice shook as she turned to the elderly white trillionaire standing in the doorway. "Man, why do you have my father's photo in your house?" The room went silent. The old woman's face drained of color, and Sophia realized she had just asked a question that would pull apart a secret buried for 20 years. What she did not know was that some truths carry enough weight to shake the powerful and save the broken at the same time. Just before we continue, I would love to know where you were watching from today, and if these stories speak to your heart, make sure you are subscribed. The alarm clock screamed at 5 in the morning, yanking Sophia out of a sleep that never felt long enough. She slapped it quiet with one tired hand and sat up in the darkness of her small bedroom. Through the paper-thin walls, she could hear her father coughing in the next room. Each rasp made her chest tighten. Sophia rubbed her eyes and stood, moving quietly through their small apartment. The place was not much, just 2 bedrooms in a building where the pipes groaned in the winter and the neighbors argued at odd hours. But it was theirs. She peeked into her father's room and found Diego sitting up against his pillows, staring out the narrow window at the dark street below, his breathing shallow and slow. "You should be sleeping, Papa," Sophia said softly from the doorway. Diego looked up and smiled, though she could see the exhaustion behind it. He was only 51, but looked older lately, worn down by years of quiet sacrifice in whatever illness the doctors still could not quite name. "Says the girl who works 2 jobs and still finds time to cook every night," he replied in a gentle voice. "Don't worry about me. I'll rest once you leave." Sophia wanted to argue, but knew it would go nowhere. Her father had always been like this, proud and private, never asking for help even when he desperately needed it. She had grown up watching him work himself quietly to the bone, always with that calm dignity he wore like a second skin. He never complained. He never explained why they had no other family, why there were no photos of her mother, why he changed the subject whenever she asked about the past. It had always been just the 2 of them against the world, and that had been enough. Until recently, when the medical bills started piling up and enough stopped being enough. She kissed his forehead and headed out into the pre-dawn cold. Her old blue Nissan coughed to life on the second try, and she drove through empty streets toward the depot where Elmwood Cleaning Services operated. She had been working for the company for nearly 2 years, taking every shift she could while trying to keep her own small dreams alive. Evening courses in hospitality management at the local community college, secondhand textbooks she bought from graduating students, business plans scribbled between client jobs and parking lots. It was exhausting, but she had promised herself she would build something better than this hand-to-mouth life. The depot hummed with activity, even at that early hour. Workers loaded supply vans, checked schedules, and exchanged tired greetings over cups of bitter coffee. Sophia clocked in and grabbed her supply bag, ready for another day. "Reyes," her supervisor Ben Carter called from across the room, holding a clipboard. "Got something different for you today." Sophia walked over, curious. Ben was a stocky man in his 40s who had always been fair with her, never giving anyone extra favor, but never being harsh without reason either. "What is it?" "Last-minute job, private estate out in Silvergate Hills. Big house, very serious money." Ben lowered his voice. "The system flagged it as a premium assignment. Usually one of our senior crew handles these, but they're all booked. Client specifically asked for a solo cleaner, someone discreet, inside access to the private rooms." Sophia's eyes widened. "How much?" "Triple the standard hourly rate." That could cover her father's prescription refill and the specialist consultation they had been putting off for 3 months. What's the catch? Ben shrugged. No catch. Rich people just have rules. Don't move personal items, don't open drawers, don't linger. Clean and go. These Silvergate Hills types are protective of their space. You interested? Job needs to be done by noon. Every instinct told her this was unusual. In 2 years of jobs, she had cleaned hotel suites, office towers, vacation homes, and once a private yacht. But something about this felt heavier, more careful. Still, triple pay was triple pay, and her father needed his medicine. I'll take it. Ben handed her the assignment sheet to sign. Stay professional. Focus on the job. These clients do not appreciate people getting too comfortable in their space. Sophia loaded her supplies into the van and looked up the address. Silvergate Hills. The man in the photograph was her father. Not as he looked now, thin and tired and struggling to breathe without coughing. Young, healthy, glowing with the kind of happiness she had rarely seen on him. But it was him, the angle of his jaw, the way he held his shoulders, the laugh that came from somewhere deep. Sophia's claw slipped from her fingers and hit the floor without a sound. Her vision narrowed. Nothing existed except that photograph and the impossible fact of why it was here. Ma'am? The word came out barely above a whisper. Victoria Harrington turned from the window. She was exactly what the house suggested, an elderly woman who carried decades of authority in the set of her face, dressed simply but in clothes that cost more than a month's of Sophia's wages. She glanced at Sophia with mild attention, probably expecting a routine question about which products to use on the desk. Then her gaze traveled past Sophia to the round table, to the photograph. Something changed in Victoria's expression. A careful blankness settled over her features like a curtain being drawn. "Ma'am," Sophia said, again, louder this time. Her voice trembled. "Why do you have my father's photo in your house?" The room went absolutely still. Even the sound from the garden seemed to fade. Victoria stood frozen, one hand still half raised from where she had been about to turn back to the window. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Victoria's eyes shifted from the photograph to Sophia's face, and she really looked at her. Truly looked. Sophia watched something move through those pale eyes. Recognition. Fear. Something deeper and more complicated than either. "Your father?" Victoria repeated quietly. Not quite a question, not quite a statement. "Yes," Sophia said, pointing at the photo, her hand unsteady. "That's him. That's Diego. Diego Reyes. He's 51. He's sick. He raised me alone my whole life. Why do you have his photo like he's someone important to you?" Victoria's face had gone pale. She looked at the photograph the way you look at a wound you thought had healed, then back at Sophia with an expression Sophia could not read at all. The silence between them was heavy with things neither of them had words for yet. Diane appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Harrington, should I ask the cleaner to wait outside?" Victoria raised one hand sharply, stopping Diane mid-step. It was the first real emotion she had seen from her, a crack in that composed exterior. "No. Leave us, please. Everyone." "Miss Harrington, I don't think—" "I said leave." Victoria's voice carried a weight that came from decades of being obeyed without explanation. Diane hesitated, then stepped back, pulling the door halfway closed behind her. Victoria turned back to Sophia, and for the first time there was something raw behind those calm eyes. Something almost human beneath all that control. "What is your name?" Victoria said slowly, carefully. "Sophia. Sophia Reyes." "And your father's full name?" "Diego Manuel Reyes. He's 51. He lives with me in Maplewood Gardens. He worked as a systems analyst his whole life until he got sick, and he raised me alone from the day I was born." Sophia's whole body was shaking. "So you tell me why his photo is sitting on your table like you keep it close on purpose."
Victoria's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against her sides, but Sophia saw it, saw the way the color had drained from her face, saw the way she had to steady herself against the edge of the desk. Whatever Sophia had stumbled into, it was not a coincidence or a misunderstanding. This was something that had been stored away deliberately, and Sophia had just walked right into it. "Sit down," Victoria said softly, gesturing to a chair near the window. Her voice was different now, quieter, more careful, like she was measuring each word before releasing it. "I'd rather stand." A pause. Then Victoria nodded, accepting that. She moved slowly to the chair at her desk and sat down. She looked old all of a sudden, not just elderly, but ancient, as if those few seconds had cost her something significant. "Diego Reyes," she repeated softly, almost to herself. "After all this time. You knew him?" "I knew him." Victoria stared at the photograph for a long moment, a very long time ago. "He was the most important person in my life." Sophia's mind scrambled. Her father, who never talked about the past, who avoided every question about her mother, who always worked quietly and steadily and alone, never connecting with anyone, never explaining why they had no extended family, no old friends, no history that went back before Sophia's own memories. Her father was important to this woman, to a trillionaire who lived in a mansion the size of a small town. "How?" Sophia demanded. "How do you know him? Why does he never talk about you? Why do you have his photo out like you're still thinking about him every day?" Victoria looked at her, and Sophia saw something break behind those calm eyes. "I can't explain all of it. Not right away. You'd better try." Victoria was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "He worked for my company once. He was brilliant, principled, one of the clearest thinkers I had ever met. He understood systems the way most people understand breathing, natural, effortless. He made me want to run the company differently, better, more honestly than I had been running it." Victoria's voice tightened. "And then one day, he was gone, and I never saw him again." Sophia laughed, and it came out sharp and hollow. "My father is a systems analyst. He has been his whole working life. He doesn't know trillionaires. He doesn't know this world. He makes his own soup and watches football on a small television. He doesn't know people like you." Victoria stood slowly and walked to the round table. She reached out one trembling hand toward the photograph, but did not touch it, as if it would vanish. That photograph was taken in Riverside Park in the spring of 2001. He was sitting on the bench near the East Fountain. I took that picture myself. I kept the original print for 23 years. She turned to look at Sophia. "Does he still wear a blue watch with a cracked face, a gift from his own father that he refused to replace no matter how old it got?" Sophia's mouth went dry. Her father's watch? He wears it every day. She had asked him about it once as a child, and he smiled and said it kept good time regardless of how it looked. "How do you know about that?" Sophia whispered. Victoria's voice dropped to almost nothing. "Because I used to tease him about it every morning." The air in the room felt impossible to breathe. Sophia backed up one step, then another. Victoria turned to face her fully, and now there was nothing guarded left in her expression, just pain and something that looked a great deal like longing. "You are 20 years old," Victoria said. It was not a question. Sophia froze. Victoria took one careful breath. "When is your birthday?" "March 14th. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Sophia had ever heard. "I need to leave." "Wait, please." Victoria reached out without closing the distance. "I know this is overwhelming, but if Diego is your father, then I need to know how he is, whether he is safe, whether he is—" "Safe?" Sophia laughed again, the sound cracking at the edges. "He's sick. He works himself past what his body can handle trying to keep us afloat. He is not safe. He is barely surviving. And you are here in your mansion with his photo on your table like he's some memory you just keep dusted and displayed." Victoria flinched as though she had been struck. I didn't know. I swear to you, I did not know. If you had known what, you would have sent money, fixed everything from a distance? Sophia grabbed her supply bag from the floor, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. You're 20 years too late for that. Sophia, wait. She was already moving toward the door. Then she stopped. How do you know my name? I never told you my name. Victoria's face crumbled. You said it yourself, just a few minutes ago.
Sophia thought about it. She had said it. Of course she had. But something about the way Victoria said her name felt different, too familiar, too quiet, like someone speaking a word they had said in private many times before. Stay away from us, Sophia said, backing into the corridor. Whatever you and my father had, it's over. It has been over for 20 years. He clearly made peace with that. Please, Victoria's voice was raw. Just tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I should have been braver. Tell him... But Sophia was already walking away, past Diane, who watched her with new eyes, through hallways that felt like they were pressing in, out through the front door and into the bright morning air that did nothing to clear her head. She climbed into her van and sat gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. Her phone buzzed, a text from her father. Good morning, my girl. Is everything okay? Sophia stared at the message. How was everything? She had just found her father's photograph in the private study of one of the wealthiest women in the country. She had watched that woman go pale at the sound of Diego's name. She had heard things that made no sense and all the sense in the world at the same time. She did not text back. She started the van and drove. Not back to the depot, but toward home, toward her father, toward the answers he had spent her whole life carefully avoiding. Behind her, in the mansion, Victoria Harrington stood in the study staring at the photograph of Diego and at the empty doorway where his daughter had just walked out. She picked up her phone with shaking hands and made a call. I need you to find everything you can about Diego Reyes and his daughter, Sophia. Where they live, how they are, what they need, and do it quietly. No one is to know. She hung up and returned to the photograph. I should have been brave. I should have chosen differently. The house settled into silence around her, full of secrets that would not stay buried much longer. Sophia burst into their apartment an hour later to find her father folding laundry in the living room. He looked up with a warm smile that faded the moment he saw her face. Sophia, what's wrong? Why are you home? She pulled out her phone and showed him the photo she had taken quickly in the study, the framed picture of his younger self. Diego's expression shattered. The folded shirt he was holding dropped to the floor. All the color left his face. He sat down heavily on the couch, one hand pressed flat against his chest like he was having trouble catching his breath. Where did you get that? He whispered. A mansion in Silvergate Hills, Victoria Harrington's mansion. You know her. You knew her. That's your photo, Papa. It's sitting on her table like she has looked at it every day for years, so you need to start explaining, because I just cleaned a trillionaire's house and found out my whole life might be something I don't fully understand. Diego stared at the photo on Sophia's screen. Tears slipped down his cheeks without sound. For a long moment he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet that Sophia had to lean close to hear it. I prayed you would never find out about her. Why? Who is she? How do you know her? How does she know about your watch? How does she know your exact birthday in that park? Diego looked up at her, and Sophia saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Not his usual quiet sadness, not exhaustion, something deeper and more frightened. That woman carries more power than most governments. And power like that leaves marks on everyone it touches, even people who only ever wanted simple lives. Then you didn't know her well. A pause. I knew her. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. A long time ago, before you were born, we were close, very close.
And when I understood what staying in her world would cost both of us, I left. I had to. Did you leave because of me? Sophia sat beside him, her mind spinning. Papa, what are you not telling me? Diego's silence was answer enough. Sophia took his hand, squeezing tightly. I need you to promise me something, he said after a long moment. Promise me you will not go back to that house. Whatever you saw today, whatever she said to you, leave it alone. She is part of a past I buried for good reasons. She is part of a world that doesn't operate by the rules the rest of us live by. She knows about your watch. She knew your birthday. She knows things she couldn't know unless they were real, unless what she felt was real. Sophia stared at him steadily. She said you were the most important person in her life. How am I supposed to walk away from that? You have to. Diego turned to face her fully. There was steel in his voice. Sophia, listen to me carefully. I left that world to protect you. If you start digging into this, if you try to untangle it, you will open doors that I closed on purpose. Trust me, please. But Sophia was already seeing the pieces she had been too young or too busy to notice before. The way her father never talked about her mother, the way he had always worked jobs that did not match his obvious intelligence, as if he was staying invisible on purpose. The way he had no old friends, no photographs before Sophia's birth, no past that stretched back further than her own memory. He had been hiding from someone, from Victoria Harrington.
That night, Sophia lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in that study. Victoria's reaction when Sophia said Diego's name, the way the old woman had looked at the photograph with an expression that was not just fondness, but grief. The trembling hands, the raw apology, the way she had known about the watch and the park bench and the specific morning light. Sophia pulled out her phone and searched. Victoria Harrington brought up thousands of results. Founder and controlling shareholder of Harrington Technologies, a global empire spanning software, infrastructure, medical devices, and renewable energy, net worth estimated in the hundreds of billions, philanthropist, one of the most influential businesswomen of the last 3 decades, the kind of person who shaped whole industries by speaking a single preference. Sophia searched deeper, looking for any mention of her father's name. Nothing. She tried variations, different spellings. Nothing. Whatever connection had existed between Diego Reyes and Victoria Harrington had been scrubbed so thoroughly from public record it might as well have never happened. But it had happened. The photograph proved it. The watch proved it. The way Victoria had said Diego's name proved it. And Sophia had a growing suspicion about what it all meant. A suspicion her father would not confirm, and Victoria had not quite denied. A suspicion that explained why Diego had run, why he had hidden himself away, why he had raised Sophia alone in small apartments when one phone call to Victoria Harrington could have solved every financial problem they had ever faced. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Something made her answer. Sophia Reyes? A calm, professional voice. Who is this? My name is James Croft. I am Miss Harrington's attorney. She asked me to contact you directly and discreetly. Please do not be alarmed. She simply wants to make sure you and your father are well. She is prepared to offer financial support, no conditions attached. We don't want her money. I understand this is difficult, but Ms. Harrington is genuinely concerned. Your father's medical situation, the bills, the treatment options he may not be able to access right now. She wants to help. Why does she care? Sophia's voice rose. Tell me exactly why she cares about a man she hasn't spoken to in 20 years. A pause on the line. I think you already know why. Say it. I want you to say it. That is between you, your father, and Ms. Harrington.
I am only here to offer support if you will accept it." Sophia tightened her grip on the phone. "Tell Ms. Harrington to stay away from us. Tell her she doesn't need anything from her. Tell her she is 20 years too late." She hung up and immediately felt the weight of what she had done. Not because she wanted the money, but because she had just confirmed to Victoria that they were worth the effort of reaching out, that Diego and Sophia were real and present and within reach. In her own home across the city, Victoria sat in the dark with her attorney's words echoing in her mind. Sophia had refused contact. Diego clearly wanted no connection, and yet Victoria could not release what she had seen in that girl's face, features she recognized, a way of standing that she knew from memory. She pulled up her private report her security team had gathered that afternoon. Photos of Sophia at work, information about Diego's apartment, his health condition, his financial situation. Everything Victoria had missed in 20 years of keeping a distance. And tucked inside the report was a sealed envelope she had requested separately. Results of a genetic comparison she had commissioned after Sophia left that morning. The sample was easy to obtain, the glass Sophia had set down on a side table during the cleaning, compared against Victoria's own genetic profile. Victoria's hands shook as she opened the envelope, but she already knew what the document would say. She had known the moment she looked at Sophia's face and saw Diego's jaw and her own eyes and the truth that had been moving quietly through the world for 20 years without her knowledge. The document confirmed it with clinical precision. Probability of maternity, 99.97%. Victoria set the paper down and buried her face in her hands. She had lost Diego because she had been too afraid to stand up against the people around her. She had lost 20 years with a daughter she had never known existed, 20 years of birthdays and first days and all the moments that make a mother necessary. 20 years while Sophia grew up in small apartments and Diego worked himself quietly sick, never knowing that Victoria had spent the same years wondering if she had made the right choice, telling herself that distance was protection, that staying away kept them safe. "I should have been braver," she whispered again to the darkness. But it was not just Diego she had failed, it was Sophia too. And now that Sophia knew enough to ask questions, now that the secret was cracking open, there would be consequences. Victoria's other heirs would find out eventually. Her rivals would use any sign of vulnerability they could find. The truth would come out, and when it did, it would tear several careful arrangements apart. Victoria made another call, this one to her head of security. "I need quiet protection for Diego Reyes and his daughter Sophia. They are not to know about it, but I want them safe starting tonight. Because I failed them once by walking away, I will not fail them again by leaving them exposed." In their small apartment, Diego could not sleep. He sat in his chair, holding a simple silver bracelet that Sophia had never seen before, worn smoothed from years of being handled in quiet moments. He had kept it hidden in the same box where he kept the few photographs he owned from that time, the ones he had never shown Sophia. He knew this day might come eventually, had always known that Sophia would ask questions as she got older, but he had hoped for more time. Time to figure out how to say it, time to prepare her for a truth that would change everything.
Victoria Harrington was Sophia's mother, and Sophia deserved to know, but knowing would place her inside a world Diego had spent 2 decades keeping her safely outside of. It would make her visible to people who watched Victoria's every move. It would pull her into a life that had nearly broken Diego before he managed to leave it. He had run to protect her. He had stayed hidden to keep her safe. And now, because of one cleaning job at the wrong address, everything he had sacrificed might come apart.
Diego closed his hand around the bracelet and made a decision. He would tell Sophia the truth. Not everything at once, but enough that she would understand why he had kept her away from Victoria's world. Enough that she would know the danger was not imagined. And then he would ask her to walk away, to let the past stay where he had put it, to choose the quiet life they had built over the complications that came with the Harrington name. He just prayed she would listen, because if she pushed too hard, if she went after the full truth, then everything he had sacrificed would unravel, and he did not know if any of them would survive what came next. After the confrontation with Victoria and the difficult conversation with her father, Sophia found she could not simply return to normal. The next morning, she called in to Elmwood, something she had never done before, and sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. If her father would not tell her everything, she would find it another way. Diego had left early for a slow walk, the only form of exercise his doctors still permitted. Before he went, he had touched her shoulder and said softly, "Please be careful, my girl. Some truths are heavy enough to change the shape of a person once you know them." Sophia started with what she had: Victoria Harrington, Trillionaire, founder of Harrington Technologies. The search results painted the picture of an empire built on innovation and intelligence. Harrington Technologies had started as a small software firm in the early 1990s and grown into one of the largest technology conglomerates on the planet. Victoria's decisions had shaped entire markets. She searched for any mention of her father's name. Diego Reyes brought up nothing connected to Harrington Technologies. She tried variations, different job titles, anything she could think of. Nothing. It was as if he had been erased from that chapter of history so completely that no trace remained. But careful erasure still leaves a shape, the outline of something that was removed. Sophia switched tactics and searched old business news from 20 to 25 years ago, around the time her father would have been in his late 20s. She filtered for Harrington Technologies, looking for unusual disruptions, staff changes, departures, anything unusual. There was plenty, the kind of internal turbulence that came with rapid growth in powerful personalities, but nothing that pointed directly to Diego, until she found a brief note in a technology journal from 2001. Harrington Technologies completes internal restructuring. Several senior technical advisory positions consolidated or dissolved. The year was significant. Sophia would have been born in 2004, which meant this entry came 3 years before her birth. She kept searching around that time and found more references to cultural realignment, leadership changes, and what journalists described as a sudden shift in the company's external communications. Then she found a photograph, a group image from a technology conference in 2000, 20 or so people standing in front of a stage backdrop bearing the Harrington Technologies logo. Sophia zoomed in, scanning every face, and there in the second row stood a young man in a dark blazer whose posture she would have recognized from across any room. Her father, younger, straighter, with an ease in his expression that she had never quite seen on his face in real life. The caption listed only Harrington Technologies Technical Leadership Team. No individual names. Sophia saved the image and kept looking. An hour later, she found something that made her stomach drop, a sealed legal filing from 2002, the details hidden behind privacy protections, but the parties listed: Harrington Technologies versus Caldwell Group. The summary mentioned corporate espionage, theft of proprietary systems architecture, and deliberate infiltration of a competitor's technical team. Sophia searched for the Caldwell Group and found a company that had collapsed by 2003, Before that, they had been significant competitors to Harrington Technologies, pursuing the same contracts, the same clients. The lawsuit suggested Victoria had accused Caldwell of stealing technical intelligence by placing someone inside her company, someone close to her. Was that what had happened to her father? Had he been caught in the middle of a corporate war? Her phone rang. Unknown number again. "Hello, Sophia. This is James Croft again. Please don't hang up. I am not calling about financial assistance. Miss Harrington would like to meet you privately, just the two of you. She says there are things you deserve to understand. My father told me to stay away from her." "I understand, but Sophia, whatever your father told you about the danger, about why he left, the situation is more complicated than you may realize. Miss Harrington is not the source of that danger. She never was." "Then who was?" A pause. "That is exactly what she would like to explain." Sophia thought about her father's warning, the fear she had seen in his eyes, but she also thought about the photograph, the watch, the way Victoria had looked at her with something that went beyond polite interest. "I'll come to the mansion, but if this is a trap—" "It is not. I have your word. Miss Harrington simply wants to give you the truth." After she hung up, Sophia sat quietly for a long moment. She knew what her father would say if she told her. He would ask her not to go. He would remind her of all the reasons the past should stay in the past. And Sophia could not follow that advice anymore, not when the past had come looking for her. That evening, when Diego came home slow and quiet from his walk, Sophia helped him make dinner and watched him move carefully around their small kitchen, the way she always did now, measuring his energy, calculating how much effort each simple task cost him. She saw him differently now, not just as her father, as someone with a hidden history that shaped her existence without her knowledge. She did not mention the call. The next morning, Sophia drove back to Silvergate Hills. The gates opened before she even pressed the intercom button. She parked in the same spot and walked up the front steps. Her heart was steady this time, not quiet. James Croft met her at the door, a man of his 60s with silver hair, in the calm manner of someone who had spent his career handling other people's most difficult situations. "Thank you for coming, Sophia. Miss Harrington is in the conservatory. I'll walk you up." "Are you staying?" Sophia asked as they went through the house. "No," Miss Harrington was clear. "This is a private conversation, but I am available if you need anything." James stopped at a wide glass door and opened it without knocking. "Miss Harrington, Sophia is here." The conservatory was bright and warm, walls of glass looking out over the side garden. Victoria sat in a chair near the center, with her hands in her lap, in an expression that suggested she had been preparing for this conversation for a long time. She stood slowly when Sophia entered.
"Sophia, thank you for coming back. Please sit." Sophia sat. Victoria sat again across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. "Your lawyer said you wanted to explain things," Sophia said. "I do, but first I need you to understand something. Everything I am about to tell you, your father kept from you because he believed it would keep you safe. He made choices I didn't agree with, but those choices came from love. Whatever you feel after you hear this, please hold on to that. Just tell me." Victoria took a slow breath. "Your father and I met in 1999. He was 25 years old, 2 years out of graduate school with a systems engineering degree, in a way of thinking about technology that was genuinely unlike anyone else I had ever met. I hired him against the advice of several people around me who thought he was too young and too much of an outsider. They were wrong. Within a year, he had identified inefficiencies in our entire infrastructure architecture that no one else had even seen. He redesigned them. He saved us years of development time." Sophia listened carefully,
trying to align this description of a brilliant, confident young engineer with the quiet man who repaired his own bicycle rather than ask a neighbor for help. He moved from technical staff to strategic advisor. He had access to everything, and he used that access not just for the company, but to push me toward better standards, fair wages for lower-level staff, ethical sourcing, transparent accounting. The board was uncomfortable with him. My investors thought he was a liability, but I listened to him because he was right. Victoria's voice softened, and because I had fallen in love with him. The words settled over Sophia like a change in the weather. We tried to keep it professional for a long time, tried to pretend the feeling was just mutual respect, just shared purpose. By 2000, it was impossible to pretend anymore. We were more than colleagues. We were partners in every real sense, even though it was complicated. I was in the middle of a board transition. I had investors watching every decision I made. Making our relationship public would have given my competitors something to use against me. Diego understood that. He accepted it, at least for a while. But it didn't last, Sophia said quietly. Because the Caldwell Group saw an opportunity. They were our largest competitor at the time, and they were watching closely. They realized that Diego had real influence over me, and they tried to use that. They approached him privately with offers, money, information, implied threats. When he refused, they went after him another way. They started rumors, whispers that spread through the industry, that he was inexperienced, that he had no right to his position, that he earned his place through personal manipulation rather than professional skill. None of it was true, but in a world that looks for reasons to dismiss people, it was enough to cause damage. Victoria's hands tightened in her lap. I should have stood up publicly, should have said clearly and on record that Diego Reyes was the most skilled person on my team, and anyone who suggested otherwise was speaking from fear of his talent. But I was a coward. I was afraid of how it would look, what it would cost the company's public standing, what it would do to the business relationships I had spent years building. I let the pressure push me into distancing myself from him professionally. I told myself I was protecting him. I was protecting myself. So he left, Sophia said. He did, but not before doing something that defined who he was completely. He had discovered by that point that the Caldwell Group wasn't just after my technology, they were after me personally. They had connections to people who operated outside business and legal frameworks, people who were not above using personal relationships as leverage or as targets. When I realized that Diego had become one of their targets, specifically because of what he meant to me, I made a choice. She turned back to Sophia. I stopped searching for him. I used my resources to bury every trace of our connection to him. I removed his name from records. I paid out of court any remaining connection that could lead someone back to him. I made him invisible, believing that if there was no visible thread between us, no one would have reason to go after him. And it worked, Sophia said slowly. It did. The Caldwell Group collapsed under their own corruption by 2003. The threats faded. But by then, Diego was gone, and I had locked the door behind him so completely that I had no way to open it again without undoing everything that was keeping him safe. Victoria looked at Sophia directly. Until you walked into my study. Until I walked into your study, Sophia repeated, and you looked at my face. And I knew, immediately and completely, because you have his jaw in my eyes and 20 years of growing up between us without me. And I am so sorry for that, Sophia, more than I know how to say. The room felt too small. Sophia stood up and moved to the window, pressing her palm flat against the glass. The garden outside was perfect and still and had nothing to do with her actual life. You're saying he left before you knew you were pregnant, she said, not turning around. Her voice was careful and flat. I didn't know I was pregnant when I made the decision to protect him. I found out afterwards, and when I did, she stopped, steadied herself. I made
The drive home was slow. Sophia sat in the parking lot of their building for a long time before going up, holding the folder Victoria had given her. Inside was proof of everything: the relationship, the threat, the corporate war that had rearranged her family before she existed, evidence that her father's disappearance from that world had been engineered out of a combination of fear, love, and miscalculation. And in the back of the folder, tucked under the legal documents, she found a letter. It was handwritten on plain paper, the kind you would buy from any stationery shop. The date was from 2002. "My dear Diego," it began, "I do not know if this will ever find you. I do not know if you are safe, or if you are angry, or if you have moved into a life that no longer has room for what we were. But I need you to know that letting you go was the hardest thing I have ever done. Every part of me said to find you, to bring you back, to refuse to let the fear win. But the danger was real, and the thought of you being hurt because of who I am and what I had built was more than I could bear. So I made you invisible. I did it out of love and out of cowardice, and I am not sure I can separate those two things anymore. I hope wherever you are warm and safe and surrounded by people who see how extraordinary you are. And if you ever read this, know that I never stopped, not for a single day. Always, Victoria." Sophia's hand trembled as she read the last line again. Victoria had loved her father genuinely, in the complicated and imperfect way that people love when they are also afraid. It did not erase the years of absence, did not soften the weight her father had carried, but it made the anger she was trying to hold on to harder to maintain. She found Diego in the kitchen, warming milk for his evening tea. He turned when she walked in, took one look at her face, and said quietly, "You went back." She set the folder on the table between them. She told me everything about the Caldwell group, about the threats, about why she made you invisible. She looked at him steadily. "And about me." Diego's cup clattered against the stove. He turned fully to face her. "Sophia." "She is my mother, Papa. Victoria Harrington is my mother, and you never told me." The words stayed in the air between them like something solid. Diego's eyes filled with tears. He did not speak for a long time. When he did, his voice came from somewhere far back. "I wanted to protect you from her world, from what that world does to people who aren't built for it. You would have grown up looking over your shoulder. You would have been a target for people who wanted to use you against her, or use her against you. I couldn't allow that. I chose your safety over everything else. Instead, I grew up not knowing who I was." Sophia's voice was steady, but not without pain. "Do you know how many times I asked you about my mother? How many times I asked why we had no family? You let me think I just wasn't meant to know, when the truth was you were keeping it from me." "She didn't know about you either," Diego said softly. "I left before either of us knew, and when I found out you were coming, I made the choice to keep you away from that world, because the world had nearly broken me before I got out of it, and I wasn't willing to let it have you." Sophia sat down. "She wants to help. She wants to cover your medical treatment, my tuition, all of it. She says it's not charity. She says it's being the mother she should have been from the beginning." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her I needed to talk to you first." Sophia looked across the table at him. "But Papa, she showed me proof. The threats were real. She did try to protect you, and she spent 20 years thinking you had simply chosen to disappear, when really, you were doing the same thing she was, protecting someone."
Diego sat down heavily across from her. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said very softly, "If I let her back into our lives, everything changes, Sophia. Her other children will see you as a problem. The press will want a story. We will stop being private people living a private life." "I know." Sophia reached across and took his hand. "But I am tired of being a private person for other people's reasons. I'm tired of living inside a story I was never told. I deserve to know who I am, even if it costs something." Diego looked at her with wet eyes. "You're right. You do deserve that. And if you want a relationship with Victoria, I won't stand in your way. But please be careful. Power makes people into versions of themselves that are hard to predict." "She still loves you," Sophia said gently. "I saw it. The photograph, the letter she kept for 20 years. She never moved on." A tear moved slowly down Diego's face. Some things can be true and still not be possible to go back to. Or maybe some things deserve a second try. That night, Sophia sent a message to James Croft. "I want to meet with Miss Harrington again, but this time my father comes too." The reply came quickly. "When and where?" "Tomorrow afternoon, the mansion. We will be ready." Sophia set down her phone. In less than 24 hours, her father would face the woman he had walked away from 2 decades ago, the woman he had protected by disappearing, the woman who was her mother. And whatever happened next would change all 3 of their lives permanently. In her study, Victoria read the message from James and closed her eyes. Diego was coming. After 20 years of not knowing whether he was well or angry or happy or somewhere in the world thinking of her, she would see him again. And this time, she would not let fear be the one making her decisions. The meeting happened in the conservatory where Sophia had first confronted Victoria. Morning light came through the tall windows and touched everything in the room with an even, steady glow. Sophia walked in first, and Diego came through the door behind her, moving slowly the way he always did now, with a careful attention to each step. Victoria was standing near the window, hands clasped in front of her, watching the door. When Diego came into view, her composure simply left her. Her hands dropped, her breath stopped. She stood looking at him the way you look at someone you have spent years trying to remember clearly, and here they are, real and present, and changed by time. Diego stopped a few feet from her. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very softly, "Victoria." She said, "Diego," and her voice broke on the single word. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then Diego, with the careful dignity that was entirely his own, said, "You look well." Victoria almost laughed. She said, "You are always too kind." Sophia stood back and let them find their way. It felt surreal and necessary at the same time, like watching the first moments of a conversation that should have happened 20 years ago. They sat down, the 3 of them, and began the slow work of bridging the gap. Victoria told Sophia about Diego's time at the company, the problems he had solved, the arguments he had made in rooms full of people who did not want to hear them. Diego, carefully and slowly, told Sophia parts of the story she had not known. The city where he had first arrived with 1 bag and a job offer. The first day he had met Victoria across a meeting table and realized immediately that she was different from every expectation he had arrived with.
By the time they left, something between them had shifted. Not healed, not whole, but acknowledged. As they walked to the car, Victoria walked with them to the door, and for the first time, she touched Sophia's hand briefly, gently, the way a person touches something they are still learning to believe is real. "I meant what I said," Victoria told Sophia quietly. "I am going to make this right." "I hope so," Sophia said. The consequences came faster than any of them anticipated. 4 days later, Ben Carter called Sophia into the depot office. He looked uncomfortable, avoiding her eyes as she sat down. "Look, Sophia, this isn't something I wanted to do. Orders from the corporate office. They're cutting your position. It's a staffing restructure." Sophia's stomach dropped. "I've never had a complaint. Not once." "I know that, and that's exactly why this doesn't sit right with me, but my hands are tied." Ben slid an envelope across the desk. 2 weeks of severance. I'm genuinely sorry." Sophia walked out into the morning air with 2 years of dependable work ending under a reason that did not hold up to examination. 2 days after that, a notice appeared on their apartment door. Rent increase of $350 per month effective immediately. Market adjustment, the notice said. Sophia had lived in that building long enough to know the landlord had not raised rent more than $50 in any single year for as long as she could remember. Diego found the notice when he came in from his evening walk. He stared at it for a long time without saying anything. Then he set it on the table and sat down. "This is starting," Diego said quietly. "Starting what?" "The pressure, the quiet kind. Someone doesn't want you in the picture, Sophia. They are beginning to make things difficult, hoping we will simply remove ourselves from the situation to make it easier." Sophia wanted to argue but couldn't. The timing was precise. The coincidences were too clean. The third blow came online. Sophia woke to messages from friends asking about posts they had seen involving her and her father. She searched and felt her stomach turn. Old information from Diego's time at Harrington Technologies had been dug up and reframed. Anonymous posts were calling him a manipulator who had exploited a relationship with Victoria for personal gain. Posts calling Sophia a fraud, suggesting she had engineered the accidental discovery as a calculated scheme for access to the Harrington fortune. The posts were coordinated. Multiple platforms, simultaneously, with specific internal details that could only have come from someone with access to old company records. Diego saw the posts and went very still. He did not cry or rage. He closed his laptop carefully and looked at Sophia with tired eyes. "Call Victoria," he said. "Tell her what is happening." Sophia called James Croft instead. He listened carefully and said he would handle it. An hour later, Victoria called directly. "I am deeply sorry. I did not anticipate they would move this quickly." Victoria's voice was tight with controlled anger. "My eldest daughter, Gloria, has retained investigators. The job loss, the rent increase, the online posts, it is all connected to her. She does not want the public record of my estate to include you. She is filing a motion challenging the legitimacy of any future changes to my estate documents. Can you stop her?" "I am working on it. But, Sophia, you need to understand something. Gloria does not just want to protect her share of my estate. She wants to prove that your discovery was orchestrated. She will go after your father's reputation and your own. She has significant resources. While she destroys my father's name and pushes us out of our home, I will cover your rent and your father's treatment, every expense, no conditions. I don't want your money. I want them to leave us alone. That is not going to happen until we resolve this definitively. Sophia, the only way through this is to face it directly, and I am prepared to do that." After hanging up, Sophia found her father at the kitchen table with his tea. She told him. Diego wrapped both hands around his cup and looked at the surface of the liquid for a long time. "We survive the way we always have," he said finally. "By keeping our heads down? By knowing who we are regardless of what they say about us."
but surviving grew harder. Sophia applied for 12 different jobs in the following week and received polite rejections from every one. Diego's hours at the part-time administrative role he had taken on were cut quietly and without explanation. Bills gathered, and Victoria's offers of help felt to both of them like accepting the terms of a battle they had not chosen to enter. Then, Diego collapsed.
Sophia got the call at 2 in the afternoon. Her father had been walking to the pharmacy 3 blocks from their building when he went down on the pavement. A passing couple had called the ambulance. By the time Sophia arrived at the hospital, he was awake but weak, connected to monitors that beeped in a steady, relentless rhythm. "I'm okay," he said when he saw her face. "Don't look at me like that." The doctor pulled Sophia aside. "Your father's condition has progressed further than our last examination indicated. The stress he is carrying is making things significantly worse. He needs specialized treatment, a level of care we are not equipped to provide here. There is a program at a private facility that has shown outcomes for patients with his presentation, but the cost is considerable." The figure the doctor gave her was not possible, not without help, not without Victoria. Sophia sat by her father's bed, holding his hand while he slept. She thought about every step that had led to this moment. The cleaning job, the photograph, the quiet conversation that had become a war. Her phone lit up. Victoria. "I just heard. Is he all right?" "He collapsed. He needs treatment we can't access without help." "Tell me what hospital. I will arrange everything." "Victoria, if I take your help, they will say it proves we were always just after your money." "I don't care what they say. Your father is sick because of the stress my family created. Please, let me help." Sophia looked at Diego, so small and still in the hospital bed. "Okay, but this doesn't mean I'm disappearing. I'm not backing down from the truth just because your daughter is afraid of it." "I wouldn't ask you to. In fact, I am about to do something that will make the situation much louder before it gets quieter. I am issuing a public statement confirming that I am your daughter, explaining what happened 20 years ago, making it clear that anyone who targets you or your father answers to me directly." Sophia's breath stopped. "That will start a war." "The war has already started. I am simply making sure everyone knows which side I am on." The statement went public that evening. Victoria Harrington, founder and controlling shareholder of one of the largest technology companies in the world, announcing she had a daughter she had not known existed, explaining the circumstances clearly, without avoiding her own failures, making explicit that Sophia and Diego Reyes deserved respect in complete privacy. The media response was immediate and enormous. Sophia's phone rang continuously. She turned it off and stayed at her father's bedside. When Diego woke and saw the news coverage playing on the hospital room television, he was quiet for a long time. "She did it," he said softly. "She chose us," Sophia said. Diego reached out and took her hand without speaking. Within 24 hours of Victoria's statement, Gloria Harrington filed a formal legal challenge, arguing that Victoria was acting under undue influence, that her mental clarity had been compromised, and that Sophia's claim of a biological relationship was fraudulent. The hearing was scheduled 3 weeks out, 3 weeks for the lawyers to assemble their cases and for the media to turn the situation into the story it had become. 3 weeks until the full truth became part of the public record. 3 weeks until Sophia's life changed permanently in one direction or the other. The courthouse was crowded with cameras and reporters and people who had followed the story closely from Victoria's statement onward. Sophia and Diego arrived together, both dressed carefully, both quiet on the walk up the front steps. Victoria arrived with her legal team, in a composure that must have taken considerable effort to maintain. Their eyes met across the lobby. Victoria nodded once,
steady and clear. Gloria Harrington sat on the opposite side of the courtroom with her legal team. She was a tall woman in her late 40s who wore her authority the same way Victoria did, like something she had been fitted for at birth. When Sophia saw her, her expression did not change. She simply looked, assessing, not seeing a person, seeing a problem. Sophia was called to the stand first. She answered questions carefully and honestly. She described her life, her work, the job that had taken her to Silvergate Hills. She explained finding the photograph, confronting Victoria, the conversation that followed. She talked about her father's illness and the financial difficulty they were navigating. Victoria's attorney, James Croft, kept his questions clear and direct. Then Gloria's attorney stood. He was a precise, measured man who asked questions the way a surgeon makes incisions. "Miss Reyes, isn't it convenient timing? Your father's medical costs are significant. You are struggling financially, and you appear at the home of one of the wealthiest women in the country. Quite a coincidence." "I was assigned that job. I didn't choose the address." "You were assigned a premium job at triple the standard rate to a private estate you had never previously been hired to clean." "Yes." "Assigned by someone in your company." "Yes, my supervisor." "And you had no prior knowledge of who owned that estate?" "None. You simply happened to find your father's photograph in Mrs. Harrington's private study." "Yes." The attorney smiled with his mouth only. "We will return to that." Diego was called next. He walked to the stand with his careful, measured pace and sat upright despite the visible effort it cost him. He answered questions about his time in Harrington Technologies, the nature of his relationship with Victoria, why he had left. He did not minimize his own choices or embellish Victoria's failings. He simply described what had happened with the plain clarity of someone who had lived with a truth for 20 years without speaking it aloud. Gloria's attorney came at him hard, questioned his professional qualifications, implied the relationship with Victoria had been strategically developed, suggested he had used Sophia as a means of re-establishing a claim he never legally been entitled to make. Diego listened to each question and answered quietly and completely. He did not become defensive. He did not raise his voice. He simply answered, and the plainness of his answers made the aggressive framing look hollow. Then came the DNA evidence, independent laboratory results confirming with clinical certainty that Sophia was Victoria's biological daughter. Gloria's legal team challenged the collection method, raised questions about chain of custody, suggested the possibility of manipulation. The laboratories were among the most respected in the country. Their procedures were documented and reviewed. The challenge did not hold. Then James Croft presented the documentation of Gloria's campaign against Sophia and Diego. Private investigator receipts, coordinated post schedules across multiple platforms, email chains showing explicit instructions to contact Sophia's employer and request her termination, payment records showing a connection to the building management company that raised their rent, phone logs documenting direct contact between Gloria's team and Elmwood Cleaning Services corporate office. Gloria had not just questioned the legitimacy of Sophia's claim, she had organized a systematic effort to eliminate a threat by making Sophia and Diego's lives untenable. The judge reviewed the evidence over 2 hours of deliberation and returned with a clear ruling. The court finds the biological relationship between Sophia Reyes and Victoria Harrington to be established beyond contest. The DNA evidence is conclusive and correctly obtained. Furthermore, the court finds that Gloria Harrington and her legal team engaged in coordinated harassment and financial intimidation targeting Sophia Reyes and Diego Reyes. These actions constitute deliberate, malicious conduct. Under the provisions of the Harrington Family Trust document signed by Victoria Harrington in 2015, Any heir who acts with demonstrated malice against a family member forfeits their claim against the estate. Gloria Harrington's inheritance claims are hereby nullified.
Gloria rose to her feet. That clause was written for external threats, not internal family. Sit down, Miss Harrington. You hired investigators to harass your sister. You coordinated financial pressure on both her and her father. You weaponized resources to try to remove a perceived threat. That is malice. You brought this consequence on yourself. After the hearing, Victoria found Sophia and Diego in a private room off the main corridor. She looked exhausted and deeply relieved in equal measure. It is done. You are both protected now. Diego looked at her for a long moment. At what cost to you? The cost I should have paid 20 years ago. Victoria turned to Sophia. I know this is not the ending of anything. It is a beginning, and a complicated one. But you will not face it alone. I promise you that. The weeks after the hearing brought both resolution and new uncertainty. Victoria's health dipped briefly from the stress of the proceedings. She spent several days resting at the mansion under medical supervision while her lawyers managed the fallout. Gloria and her siblings retreated from public view, diminished but not gone. Sophia made decisions about her own future. She had no interest in corporate roles at Harrington Technologies. The company was not her world, and she felt no pull toward its politics. But Victoria's charitable foundation, the part of the Harrington empire that funded scholarships and housing programs and access to medical care for working families, that was something she understood from the inside. I want to use it for people like us, Sophia told Victoria during one of the quiet afternoons they were slowly learning to share. People who work honestly and still can't get ahead because the systems they're working inside don't see them. That is what the foundation should do. Then make it so, Victoria said. It is yours to shape. Use it as you think best. Sophia kept her Elmwood cleaning uniform in her new apartment, a modest place she had chosen herself despite Victoria's offers of something larger. It hung on the back of her door as a reminder of where she had come from and of the morning she had asked a question that changed everything. Diego's treatment began 2 weeks after the hearing. The specialist Victoria arranged had seen similar cases before and had a clear plan. Diego responded well, slowly, with setbacks, but forward. His cough quieted, his color came back. He began to sit up in the mornings again without the effort it cost him. He and Victoria met several more times as the weeks passed, carefully, with the particular caution of 2 people who remembered both the love and what it cost them. They did not return to what they had been, but they built something new, slower, more honest, based on who they actually were now rather than who they had been to each other in a story that ended badly. One afternoon, Sophia drove to the mansion and found Victoria in the conservatory, looking at the spot on the shelf where the framed photograph of Diego had sat for 20 years. The photograph had been taken down. In its place, Victoria had set a new frame, a recent photo of the 3 of them taken in the conservatory during one of their early dinners, all 3 looking slightly uncertain and entirely real. I'm having the original donated to a small museum near where it was taken, with full attribution, Diego Reyes, photographed in Riverside Park 2000. I want him remembered with his actual name. He would hate that, Sophia said. Victoria smiled. I know, but he'll accept it. Sophia looked at the new photograph in the frame. 3 people who had arrived at each other by accident and difficulty and 20 years of wrong choices followed by the slow, hard work of better ones. Are you all right? Victoria asked. Sophia thought about the question genuinely. All right was not quite the correct description. Too much had been lost between the discovery and the resolution. Too many years, too much pain carried in silence by a man who deserved better. But she had a mother now, if they were careful and honest enough to build something worth having. Her father had care and something resembling peace, and she had a foundation with real resources pointed at the problems she had grown up inside. "I'm finding my way," Sophia said finally. "That's more than I had 3 months ago." Victoria nodded. "That is everything." That evening, Sophia texted her father. "Family dinner at the mansion tonight. Come when you're ready." He replied after a few minutes. "Is Victoria cooking?" Sophia smiled. "No, she is ordering from the Italian place on the corner." He replied, "Good. I'll be there at 7." They sat at the long dining table with takeout containers between them, and the kind of conversation that does not happen in formal settings. Diego told stories about Sophia as a small child that made Victoria cover her mouth with her hand. Victoria told Diego about the time his infrastructure redesign accidentally locked every executive out of the main building at 3 in the morning during a board meeting. Sophia talked about her plans for the foundation, the specific communities she wanted to reach, the programs she thought were missing. It was an ordinary evening, simple and a little awkward, but very real.